Hello everybody, welcome back to Throttle Grotto. Probably the last nice day we're going to have here in the Northwest. So I got the door open, I got the fuel pump, the filter, the wiring, all that stuff hooked up, the new lines. So really, all that's left to do is clean off the stuff that might fall off of the roof if I crank it and it starts to run, and put some fuel in it and see if this thing fires off, because that's why we're all here, right? So let's get to it. Okay, now I know that I am taking a risk by starting the car without replacing these fuel lines. These do look to be original. This one also should be replaced. I have the bucket underneath the power steering in case the power steering leaks, because I haven't checked that that's actually tight. Why it's leaking, I have no idea. But there's kitty litter. I have checked. There is oil. The oil actually looks pretty good. Like if we pull the dipstick here, like it doesn't look bad. It looks clean, like somebody changed it at some point. So I'm going to throw some fuel in here. The battery's already hooked up. I left it hooked up overnight. Hopefully it's not dead. I also replaced that clamp because that clamp was super janky. So yeah, let's throw some fuel in this thing. I also got a brand new fuel cap because somebody had put a BMW fuel cap on here. I don't know why. Doesn't make any sense to me at all. But they did it. I've got some nice, fresh, clean fuel here. And a screwdriver to pop the little door open. Whoa. All right, I have no idea if the battery went completely flat, if there's a big current draw on this thing from sitting overnight. I have no idea. But let's find out. Got some neutral, got a key. Don't show any fuel. I don't hear the fuel pump running. Well, I smell fuel. That's not great. Let's see what's going on. I had a waterfall of fuel underneath the car. And since I had a waterfall of fuel, I didn't film it, because that would be embarrassing. And it was going everywhere. So let's try this again, shall we? Okay. We know that we have fuel because, well, we had fuel back there. Let's see. I guess the first thing to check is do we have sparking up here? So I need to go get a plug and check that. All right. I should be able to see that pretty effectively without a window in the way. Okay, it doesn't look like I'm getting any spark. Okay, I checked for power at the coil. I have power at the coil. What are the chances that someone just took the rotor out of this thing? Like, entirely possible. And just absconded with the rotor like they did the fuel pump. No, it still has a rotor in it. But let's check it out. Well, I don't know if you can see in there, but it's got a little bit of carbon tracking on the inside of that cap. Gave me a decent used cap. So we're just gonna put this on real quick. Okay, after a bit of a learning curve and a little bit more ciphering, the cap was also on backwards, so it wouldn't seat. So I'm just going to presume that whoever the Muppets were that did this had it right, and we'll just guess that they didn't mess up the firing order. I mean, they messed everything else up. Why? I don't know why I'm going to try to give them extra credit for anything. But hey, if I get spark, that is a step ahead, right? Does not seem like we have spark. Time to go back to the books. All right, last thing I'm going to test today is I'm going to test for injector pulse. Just going to use my little Noid kit, and we're going to see if we have some injector pulse here. Which one of these is Bosch? That one. Set it up there so even I can see it. All right, no injector pulse. That's great. That leads me to believe it's something electrical. All right, everyone, I apologize for my voice. If I sound stuffed up, I am. I picked up a cold. I've been on the couch for a few days after work. Haven't been out in the garage at all. But one of the things I figured out was this is the bracket for the speed and reference sensors for the 944. And it mounts down here in a hole behind the intake manifold into the transmission. And these are supposed to pick up the signal and send it to the ECU so that the ECU tells everything to fire and play along nicely with each other. And this bracket was not even connected to the transmission. It was just flopping around in there. And if you look at the tip of the sensor here, you can see that that one is toast. I had to cut it and bend it so that I could get this whole bracket out. Part of it broke off. That holds the, I think it's like a knock sensor or something, but yeah, this whole thing is destroyed. Fortunately, thanks to the bays of E, I was able to get a whole new assembly with two supposedly good working sensors that came out of all of the running car. So I have to gap, let's see here, I have to gap this one. And the way you gap it is you stick a 0.8 millimeter thick washer to the back side of this, make sure it doesn't fall off, and then you put the whole sensor, the whole assembly in, tighten down the brackets, pull this sensor back out, take the washer off, and then put this sensor back in. Now they do make like a, what do you call it? Like a 3D printed plastic one that you can buy for this whole thing. Ideally, I would use new sensors, but this came from a running car, and for getting this thing running and at least attempting to see if it runs, this is going to be a good enough scenario. So I'm going to get these sensors loosened up and get them so that they come out of the bracket, which I hope they do. And then we'll get them all set up to put back in the car and see if it runs. So the easiest way I figured out to do this was a piece of Gorilla Tape is 0.441. So I'm going to use 2 pieces of Gorilla Tape on the bottom of the old sensor to make my spacer, and that should do it. Then I can keep this old sensor for spacing everything in the future. And worst case scenario, if a piece of Gorilla Tape falls down in the bell housing, it'll get chewed up or fly out or burn up or whatever, but it won't be as damaging as a washer would be. All right, and now I've got my tape on there all trimmed around to fit the sensor. Hopefully the sensor that I have will go back in the bracket. Ooh, I didn't think about that. I'm probably going to have to work on that a little bit and clean up the not round parts of this sensor. Okay, so just a quick hit with the grinding wheel, and now this sensor will slide in and out of the bracket. So now it's a spacer, no longer a sensor, but now we can go put this into the car, tighten down the 2 bolts. I have to get the 2 bolts, but install the 2 bolts here, set the spacer height, pull this sensor out, put the other 2 back in. There we go. We'll see if she fires up. I have what I believe is appropriately long hardware. We'll go throw this in the car real quick. Note to self, we also need to take the aluminum sleeve at least back flush with the bracket, otherwise it won't go in. If you also said, hey idiot, take out that 3rd sensor, you'd be right. That was just about the least amount of fun I've had for a while. So, I'll show you guys where this is. Back here, down there is the bracket. I've already tapped the little aluminum sleeve for the forward one back down in there. Now I'm going to put the sensor in the back one and then tighten up the bolts for the bracket and then mount the whatever that 3rd piece is. I can't remember what it's called right now. It just goes to this little plug here. Looks like a test port or something. I don't think it affects how the car runs. Just keeps junk out of there. And then yeah, we'll put the real sensors in and see what happens. Okay, I'd like to take a very tired and frustrated moment to acknowledge the real men of genius who worked on this car before. This is one of the plugs. This is the other. You'll notice that this one has no garbage in it. That is because I cut out all of the old liquid electrical tape they filled with it. Or they filled it with. Such as this. So, I will be at this for another 20 or 30 minutes, chipping away all of the old liquid electrical tape that they installed on and around this plug. Right after a significant amount of time with a pick, no holes in my hands, which is amazing. I don't even know how. I have extracted the plugs, and I've still got one piece of little garbage in there. There we go. So now I should be able to plug both of these in. I don't know which one is which because there's supposed to be a bracket here. I'm just going to plug them in. I took the little wires off so that they will unplug easily later if I need to swap them. But I do have tack bounce, which is here. So that's what tack bounce looks like. The needle just kind of jumps a little bit when you're cranking it. So that tells me the sensors are working. Okay, so one of the things that we're fighting right now is injector pulse. So I've got my Noid light hooked up directly to the injector, and I'm not getting the injectors to fire. So that is the next thing to figure out on this car. All right, so I tried swapping out the DME relay. I got a Euro parts one, which some people have had mixed success with, but I have one and I will try it. All right, so not successful. Okay, so I thought that the 944 would run in this episode. Apparently it doesn't. I've still got some stuff to check, but I'm not in any condition to be crawling around underneath the dash or any of that kind of stuff today. I'm going to have to come back. So unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to see if the 944 even runs. I was hopeful, but not today. So until next time, get out there and work on something.